than ever, our society is exploring what it means to be feminine or masculine. Simply look at the media we consume, dominated by masculine heroes and heroines. Yes, there are women in the mix, but they are not coded as feminine. What do I mean by this exactly? Whether or not you believe masculinity and femininity are traits given to us by nature or nurture, it is an acceptable truth that the masculine spirit and the feminine spirit together compose humanity. Even if these traits are societal constructs, they are necessary variables in dissecting the dominant sex in cultures. In other words, we should not throw away these concepts in search of our own selves. We can use them instead to discover our own path. Much of our Western society is masculine dominant.
That's my secret, Cat. I'm always angry.
Strength, perseverance, loyalty, success, independence, and assertiveness are traits every person, man or woman, must strive to embody.
I don't know how you do it.
I don't know how you do it.
I don't know how she does it.
Feminine traits are still seen to be lesser than. Sensitivity, compassion, tolerance, nurturance, intuition, creativity, and deference are rarely praised, especially in superhero media. It is rare to see a male or female hero show the latter as more important to the former. Nearly every act of compassion
You want to feel what I feel?
is immediately met by one of strength.
Welcome to my world.
Otherwise, the majority of the audience will read the hero as weak, which again illustrates that our society has not yet learned that weakness is not attributed to women, and feminine traits do not denote weakness. Heroines that are badasses, however, get the most praise. Women who embody the masculine traits, who are beautiful but also strong, sensitive but also confident, are the sorts of heroines that people want to see. Princesses, often known for their compassion, nurturance, and non-violence, are for girls and are seen as lesser. It is no wonder that in this society there are two extreme ways women can react to this rejection of femininity. One is to embrace their role as lesser than man. The other is to reject the feminine completely, to leave it in favor of the masculine. This is the heroine's journey. This journey is heroic because it rejects the norm. When a woman embarks on a quest to discover her masculine, but is met with an entirely different lesson, finding wholeness, overcoming societal pressures, and discovering the balance of the feminine and the masculine within herself.
And no one will ever forgive you for what you've done. You're wrong.
You might be wondering, what does this have to do with Star Wars? Well, everything, actually. The original story has long been understood to be inspired by Joseph Campbell's monomyth.
It's not simple morality play. It has to do with the powers of life and their inflection through the action of man.
And Luke's story arc is a great way to teach kids about the hero's journey. It's a blueprint that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. Campbell admits later in his life that in translating all of the world's myths into one monomyth, he inadvertently left out the feminine perspective. But this is not simply out of ignorance. In fact, Luke's journey, as well as the hero's journey, is about a young man who seeks to become a hero, to defeat the villain, but instead discovers something more. He finds his anima along with his animus. His final act is a compassionate one. Campbell's view was that for many of these heroes, the end goal was to reach the feminine and to find balance in oneself. It's just not explicit, it's symbolic. Campbell's work, Goddesses, published long after his death, alludes to this more so than his work on the hero's journey. But in terms of a heroine's journey, this is why Maureen Murdoch's work is so important. It's not a recreation of Campbell's work from a feminine perspective. Instead, it's an extension of Campbell's work. Murdoch wrote from a deeply personal and psychological perspective, entirely different from Campbell's. Her work faces the problems of women in society head-on, as opposed to simply recounting how they came to be. Murdoch understands that men and women face different struggles in society, but that gap is also closing. Her book holds hundreds of stories and anecdotes from women of various backgrounds, all who have experienced a similar journey because of their sex. The goals of these two journeys are nearly identical, moving beyond duality.
This is the mask of God.
Mask of eternity.
That is the metaphor through which eternity is to be experienced as a radiance.
And these other two figures?
Whenever one moves out of the transcendent, one comes into a field of opposites. These two pairs of opposites come forth as male and female from the two sides. One has eaten of the tree of the knowledge, not only of good and evil, but of male and female, of right and wrong, of this and that, of light and dark. Everything in the field of time is dual, past and future, dead and alive. All this, being and non-being, is, isn't. The mask represents the middle, and the two represent the two opposites. And they always come in pairs. And put your mind in the middle. Most of us put our minds on the side of the good against what we think of as evil. You're in the field of time when you're man. And one of the proudest of life is to live in the realization of both terms. That's to say, I know the center, and I know that good and evil are simply temporal apparitions.
This goes against what society dictates, however, especially Western religious communities. Women, in most all of humanity's myths, are symbols of life. But in the Western viewpoint, life and nature is sinful.
The human woman does give birth as the earth gives birth to the plants. She gives nourishment as the plants do. So woman magic and earth magic are the same. They are related. And the personification then of this energy which gives birth to forms and nourishes forms is properly female. When you have a goddess as the creator, it's her own very body that is the universe. She is identical with the universe. Life is evil in this view. Every natural impulse is sinful unless you've been baptized or circumcised in this tradition that we've inherited, for heaven's sakes.
Women, therefore, have had to overcome a cultural bias that is weaved into the fabric of our moral teachings.
By having been the tempter, women have paid a great price because in mythology, some of this mythology, they are the ones who led to the downfall.
Of course they did. I mean, they represent life. Man doesn't enter life except by woman. And so it is woman who brings us into the world of polarities and a pair of opposites and suffering and all. But I think it's a really childish attitude to say no to life with all its pain, you know? To say this is something that should not have been.
Women bring us into the polarities of life with its sufferings. Campbell emphasizes that men and women must learn to accept their dual nature and live in harmony with one another. This message of balance might be what Star Wars is trying to teach us. Murdoch writes, "Today's heroine must utilize the sword of discernment to cut away the ego bonds that hold her to the past and to find out what services her soul's purpose. She must realize resentment toward the mother, put aside blame and idolization of the father, and find courage to face her own darkness. Her shadow is hers to name and embrace." The Mortis gods remain one of the great mysteries of the Star Wars universe. How they came to be, where they reside, what happens if one of them leaves or is killed. But the most interesting mystery to me is, where is the mother? In another video of mine, I briefly touched on how the living force and the cosmic force represented the male and the female. The living force is the energy that exists within and between all things. It is ceaseless and ever-renewing. The cosmic force has an awareness and a purpose and a will that had been silent, dormant after the demise of the Sith, only to wake again during Luke's exile. Both Luke and Anakin are considered by Snoke to have been favorite instruments of the cosmic force, and now it seems Rey is as well. I theorize that the cosmic force is coded as female because of its nurturing nature.
Close your eyes. Feel it. The light. It's always been there. It will guide you.
The father of Mortis seems to be the embodiment of the living force, whether literally or symbolically we have yet to find out. The same goes with the children. The father alone had failed to keep the two from warring with one another, and it was slowly killing him. The landscape of Mordis and its frequent changing from night and day show the lack of balance in this sacred place. It also represents what's happening in the rest of the universe. The cycles of war between various political factions, as well as between the light and dark force users, is one that has no end in sight. Over time, it seems the cosmic force has willed into being a chosen one in order to bring temporary balance to the force. The chosen ones we know of are Anakin and Luke, and now possibly Rey, but we'll get to that eventually. The temporary balancing of these conflicts is symbolized in the Mortis arc. If only they had a mother as well, they might be able to live in harmony. That also reminds me of... Mothers in the Star Wars universe don't stick around for long, and their children greatly suffer for it. Anakin was taken from his mother, Luke's real mother died in childbirth, and the parents that raised him died quickly into his hero's journey. Even Ben was removed from his mother's influence at a crucial time in his life. And I honestly believe that if Carrie Fisher were still with us, Leia would have been instrumental in bringing her son back to the light. This imbalance of having one parent or none is symbolic of the greater issue in the Star Wars universe. Everything is out of balance because the feminine is missing. It's not the sole solution to have the feminine. The masculine and the feminine must be together in harmony, which brings me to...
Because when you substitute the male for the female, you get a different psychology, a different cultural bias.
Particularly if you cut the female out and don't have any... I mean, if the male is on top like this, and the female is the subordinate all the way, you have a totally different system from that when the two are facing each other. And in that yin-yang figure from China, you know, in the dark fish, or whatever you want to call it, there's a light spot, and in the light one, there's a dark spot. That's how they can relate. You couldn't relate at all to something that of which you did not participate, into which you did not participate at all.
In the tradition of a good Star Wars heroic journey, Rey doesn't have a mother. But unlike her male counterparts, Rey can become a mother. This is the most incredible possibility for Star Wars because what is needed to balance the galaxy are women. Not because they are underrepresented, they are, but more so because this is the lesson of the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. This is the true balance we would need to find true resolution for our story. Rey represents everything missing to make the story whole, to bring a satisfying resolution to the Skywalker saga. Rey is strong, but she is more so compassionate. She is quick to anger, but only because she is fiercely protective of her loved ones. She is confident in her abilities, but also believes in others when she sees even a glimpse of good in them. Rey is a feminine hero. She's a lioness, a goddess, a heroine. In the Navajo creation story, Changing Woman speaks to her consort, the sun. Remember, as different as we are, you and I, we are of one spirit. As dissimilar as we are, you and I, we are of equal worth. As unlike as you and I are, there must always be solidarity between the two of us. Unlike each other as you and I are, there can be no harmony in the universe as long as there is no harmony between us.